Hello and welcome to another box set breakdown with me, Mike Moans. Today we're going to be looking at the Scales Ales Tavern from Dungeons & Lasers. If you've not watched my video on the Castle Stronghold, I do recommend you watch that first, as many of the tips will apply to this. This is a set I picked up from Wayland Games for £125, and it packs a whopping 328 pieces, including all connector clips. Today we will be joined by Willow, who's going to be acting as our purveyor. The model set itself comes with 4 floors, including the basement to hunt your traditional rats in, and it comes with many of these railing pieces, which are quite uncommon on retail sets, having previously only been featured in the Castle Stronghold and the Sorcerer's Spire. This set is no small feat. It does contain 9.8 inches of height, a whopping 11.8 inches depth, and a really wide and solid 19 inches. This gives you so much versatility for this kit, I can't wait to show you. As with all the kits, the online manual is available with this QR code. When reviewing the Castle Stronghold, I did note there was no download button for the instructions online. However, with the Scales and Ales, they have updated that and made it fully downloadable with a one-click PDF. Thank you, Archon, for taking that on board. I really do appreciate it. It doesn't make it idiot-proof. My printer did run out of paper and I attached the second half upside down, which did confuse me later on in the video. One of the amazing things about this set is the basement itself is made out of the Fantasy Starter set, and the rest of the building is the Tudor Mansion set. With the amount of sprues you get for the Tudor Mansion, you could actually build this into anywhere between 3 and 5 domiciles if you wanted, especially with the addition of the roof components. Like many of you, there was a time in my dungeon mastering life when my body of work began to change. Random dungeon tiles popped up in strange places, and railings I just couldn't control. For this reason, I've had to change my approach to painting dungeon tiles and primarily their storage. In this box, I have an additional Fantasy Starter set, as well as additional railings and components and roofs. If you'd like to see me paint through all these dungeon tiles with various different schemes, including the up-and-coming caves, please do check me out on both YouTube and Twitch, where we live stream miniature painting 5 days a week. When painting this project, I did have an additional box set of the Fantasy Starter set to paint, so I did both of those with some additional roofs and railings, all in the space of a week. To confirm, that's a Fantasy Starter set, additional railings, roofs, and the entire tavern in under a week. The tavern basement and the additional Fantasy Starter set were primed green with TT Combat green primer, and then dry brush through the blue greys with a final white grey at the end. For this, I use paints from 2 thin coats, as I find they're absolutely exceptional on dungeon tiles. They do take particularly well to dry brushing, unlike, say, my Reaper paints. The railings and the tavern walls were all primed in leather brown from Army Painter, and then they were taken through various stages of wood painting, which you can see a tutorial for on my channel. The plaster itself went down really well over the leather brown undercoat. We stippled in layers of dust bowl all the way through to the ivory shades to build up that really nice textured plaster. Using coloured primer and keeping away from washes where possible made this project so much quicker. Like I said, the whole project, including additional parts, in under a week. And that was including the distractions of live streaming. And those trolls. Especially the moderator trolls. Professional trolls. While the instructions do remind you of this, it's easy to let it slip your mind. The Fantasy Starter set walls shown here are reversible with different textures and designs on each side. If you're anything like me, you will want to keep tabs and be consistent. Over the next few weeks, we are going to be decorating both the basement and the tavern itself with new bartenders, kegs, and a specialised bar. If you'd like to follow along, do join us on Twitch. This will be no surprise to those who followed my Stronghold video, but when building this, the instructions do colour code the doorways, they colour code the alternate walls, windows, and such. While the build instructions are more often guidelines, I do recommend you follow it at this stage of the build. These layers will support the upper layers as they come in. Apologies for using my middle finger so much on this, my index finger just has a habit of falling out. It's kind of rude like that. With this video, we will be following the instructions as closely as possible. You will see there are some very big issues later on, but don't worry, I'm going to show you how to fix them. Kind of. In a roundabout way. Many of you asked after the last video, why did I leave so many of my mistakes in? The reason is there's a very specific way that these dungeon tiles can work, and the very basic one, you can't put a wall dividing a double tile. So you do need to make sure that your single and your doubles are in the right place and right orientation, should you be following the instructions. As always, I do encourage you to play around. There is full modularity with this kit, integrating with all the other kits from Dungeons & Lasers. During the YouTube lives that Archon Studio promotes, I do always ask, are we getting upgrade packs in the future? Things like a grand entrance for the Stronghold. Are we getting an internal tavern set featuring kegs, bars, tables, maybe some patrons? While they didn't give a direct answer, they did say this is something on our radar and we are looking at it. Archon Studio are one of those favourite brands of mine because they listen to the people and aren't shy of a challenge. I really can't wait to update this and my castle video with a potential future expansion. That said, I am packing a little bonus for you at the end of this video, so do stay tuned. These edge clips stop the floor from sliding while mounted on top of a previous floor, and they do keep them fairly consistently structured. I will warn you, this is a very large kit and it does put a lot of pressure on the individual clips, so when turning this, please do be careful, it is very easy to crack in half. Luckily, with the simplicity of the system, it's really easy to repair. Once the edge clips are mounted and you have turned it over, they do increase the height from the floor to whatever surface you're working on. This means when you're putting pressure on it, it is easy for clips to fall out of place. The instructions themselves aren't specific on if you should mount these walls while it's mounted above the basement, or if you should do it separately like I am doing now. But last time I built on top of the previous layers, now I'm going to build the layers individually and see if it's any easier. So far so good, because we can reach our hand underneath and apply extra pressure where needed to make sure the clips stay in place. I am having issues, as I did in the last video, where I've got paint on the little pegs, so sometimes you need to keep a knife on hand just to shave down the excess paint so that the walls mount the floor clips with ease. Having tried my hand at the new Prismacast, thanks to Archon Studio sending me some advanced copies, I will tell you now, they fit perfectly. Silky smooth, no gap. 10 out of 10. Honestly, if I counted how much time I had to shave down pegs for this video, probably over an hour. With a little forethought, you could use masking tape to keep them safer in the painting stage, so you wouldn't have the issues I faced. That little extra care will help you minimise gaps between your floors and walls, making the whole structure better aligned. As you build this with the more walls you attach, the base layer does become stronger, so you'll be able to move it more freely. Quite often you will hear a little plink as a clip has fallen into the layer below. Luckily, you can just tilt this and easily fish them out. But I still wish I had somebody on hand with smaller hands. Unfortunately, my assistant today doesn't even have opposable thumbs. Or the inclination to show up to work, despite getting involved at the box stage. With this project, I did have a lot of parts already painted for this from the Castle Stronghold, namely these edge clips. When I did that project, I wanted to keep more unison with the wooden edges and the stone edges, so I did paint them from this set with that project. Having a reserve of all these pre-painted clips has made this video, and this build in general, so much quicker. I do recommend that you do paint these in batches. I did briefly hint earlier that I changed the way my collection works now. My core set is now all connectors, edging pieces, roofs and railings. I have an additional set which is 4 fancy starter sets, 2 of which are sandstone, 2 of which are painted in this green grey like you see here today. Then I've got more specific sets, the sewer, the dwarven mines and the abomination vaults. My next box contains mostly the room enhancements. These are things like the warlock altar, the torch chamber and sets like the tavern and the castle stronghold having their own box. I do hope to get the dwarven halls matching that size as well. At this rate I'll be getting a small shipping container just for my dungeon tiles, certainly with the value of the caves campaign. If you're not following the Caves campaign, you are missing out. There is a gelatinous cube just for following the campaign should you pledge, and there is already up to 70 inches of advertised dungeon tiles. To claim your free gelatinous cube, do check the link in the description below. At this point in the video, you may have noticed I have started to struggle due to the fact that the building keeps snapping in half. It's 21 inches, it's got a lot of pressure on the middle joints. What I suggest you do is break down the building to a manageable size and build the walls for those areas and connect them later on. That would have been the sensible thing to do had I thought about it at the time. For some reason, my primitive brain just kept saying I need to attach this back together and then keep going. I clearly haven't evolved as much as the rest of you. Even though the answer is obvious and I've done it multiple times before, the solution? It came to me. Just turn it on its side. Take the weight and the pressure off the pegs and build it on its side. You can build all 21 inches without collapse for the most part. You can correct it easy as you go, and it was so much easier. It's actually quite hard making this video to see that I was basically smashing 2 rocks together. I now completely understand why my partner Sarah is making a comic book called My Boyfriend the Caveman. With the speed of many antelopes, I fly through the rest of this floor, riding this brainwave to the next bout of brain scramblies. When cleaning up these plastic sprues, I did use a Dremel to sand down the edges and get rid of the little nubbins. I may have got a little overkill on a few of these connectors, which have lost their friction, so if you do find that with any of yours, just replace them. I'm sure you have enough by now. With this set, you do tend to find there's a good handful of spare parts and a lot of spare connectors. With these larger sets, including the Sorcerer's Spire and the Grand Stronghold, you do find they are bound by the ratio of the sprue. What I mean by that is if a sprue has 5 parts and this kit requires 3, they will give you the full 5. One example most relevant to this kit is the railings. There is a moment later on in the build where you get 2 small railings where you could use 1 big one. However, because of the ratio of the sprues, it is easier to give you 2 on 1 sprue than it is the long. The reason they do this is these bundle sets save so much money by replicating sprues. The most expensive part of the mini making process is the design and then the original molds, By replicating sprues, we are saving so much money from Archon, which they willingly pass to us. This is the most important part of the video, and I cannot stress that enough. Previously, I have been following the instructions near enough to the letter. However, when you get to this stage, you may think you are missing a square floor tile, in fact, 2 square floor tiles. This is where the instructions are wrong. You have done everything correct so far, and you will need to make some adjustments going forward. Archon have been made aware of this, and they are going to sort out a fix. In the meantime, this is how I fixed it. I will also include how I checked for these issues. You'll be glad to know you do not need to buy additional parts. You will be able to replace these with double floors spare later in the build. If you have any spare Tudor Mansion parts, or even the wooden cottage or the torch chamber, you could replace this easily with one of those. Here I'm checking to see if I accidentally put a double where there should be a single. I actually struggled to find where the mistake was in the instructions, even looking at future parts, so I did use 2 spare pieces for an additional kit I had. Hopefully by the time you get to this kit, Archon will have fixed the instructions. I didn't find the solution until I made this video. I did buy an additional Tudor Mansion because I want to modify this building to host something very special on 3D printing. So for me it was easier just to use these 2 pieces. As somebody with access to a large 3D printer, I really want to include this Adventurers Guild bar from Cast and Play in this build. I can't imagine any other model kit being big enough to accommodate it. With the addition of the extra Tudor Mansion, I can make a bigger room to accommodate the square footage. I do still need to figure out how I'm going to accommodate 33 centimeters of bar kegs, so maybe add an extra floor or extend the top roof. It'll be a future video. With this floor being smaller than the last, it was so much easier to make, so much easier to mount. With the amount of walls below, it was really easy to build this while on top of the previous structures. At this stage, when the building's getting bigger and there's more obstructions to your line of sight, the colour coding is just dreamy. The colour coding does also allow for a variation in the single and the double windows, so you can clearly define the 2. This was an issue I had with TT Combat's laser cut terrain. Their windows weren't even on the instructions. You just had blank square that may or may not have had a window in it. You know, I still get horrible flashbacks to the day I had to build the Captain Bamboozeled's tower from TT Combat. It ended up with me punching it to death, wrecking it, turning it into powder, midstream looking like some kind of kaiju. None of that with the team from Archon. They look after us. Going back to doing more railings, this is the example of where a double railing would have been better. As you can see, the kit includes one for the left-hand side and the front, but not one for the right. I do have a spare, so I should have replaced it. You'll find a couple more examples of this as you work your way around this balcony here. With my idea of using this to build an entire town worth of houses, it's actually really good to have a few of these small railings because I can make small balconies for each one of the houses. I could also make a few internal staircases, health and safety compliant. And already we're flying onto the final floor. Again, we use more of the pre-painted pegs I got from my castle. It was this section of the build that inspired me to change my entire storage solution. More often than not, I was going through 5 cases trying to find the right pegs and the right parts. If you are somebody who leans heavily on the modularity of Dungeons and Lasers like myself, do it sooner rather than later, it will pay off. Again, this is a part where I really got into the habit of trying to fix things as I was going. Just fix things at the end of that section. Due to me cutting one clip very poorly and reducing the amount of contact area on its edges, what I should have done is finish doing all the walls around the perimeter, then finally fix the clip. It was a waste of time in rebinding it every 3 seconds. Again, it's quite hard for me to look back and see all the mistakes that were really obvious for me to fix, so I hope this video helps you. With this room assembled, it's time to do the final mounting, and then we're moving on to roofs. Now there is something interesting here, these 2 little pegs that hang off the side. These are supposed to bind with the roof. Honestly, I would just replace them with normal wall clips and just not attach the roof to this side. It is completely unnecessary. In fact, it limits access to that part of the building when you're playing. If, like me, you need to remove the roof and move the miniatures and reveal parts to your players, it just adds time and fiddling you don't need. One of the subtle strengths with the Dungeons & Lasers design is the roofs are so well held together and discreetly. The seams are almost flawless. With the addition of these wonderful pegs at the side, you can just rest these on the building and it is pretty ironclad. The roofing sprues are sold separately by Archon Studio, but they are retailing at about £38. When you analyse the cost breakdown of this set, this is about 33% of the overall box value. So my idea of making an entire city with domiciles made from this tavern, it would be significantly cheaper for me to buy 2 boxes of this than it would be multiple of, say, the wooden cottage, plus the roofs, or the Tudor Mansion, plus the roofs. This set is insane value. With rough math, this contains 7 Tudor Mansion boxes. It contains a roof sprue and a fancy starter set without the addition of props. That's bonkers. So that's 38 for the roofs, 25 for every Tudor mentioned, that's 7. And then you've got, we'll say about £20 worth of the Fantasy Starter set, being very generous. A box of stairs is about £12.50. I also don't have a price for the additional clips and the railings. And bearing in mind, these are my friendly local prices, so they're 10 to 15% cheaper than retail. At this point, I discovered another flaw in the instructions, and it's a little more obvious. This roof is not as it is in the box, and the windows don't face the right way. Rest assured, the pieces are in the box to do this, but they're just absent from the instructions. So you can build it true to box art. Box art aside, I present to you the Scales Ales Tavern.
But wait! There's more!
This set absolutely needed the basement for the very traditional go and hunt rats in the basement quest you start at level 1. But just look how much this city street set is elevating the tavern. When playing this encounter, I would be using the basement as a separate map, simply for ease of access. The upper levels, including lifting 3 levels at once, do hold together really firm when all the walls are mounted. I do stress that a lot of my issues will probably be addressed when they fix the instructions, but windows shouldn't be on this side. They definitely need to be front facing. As an upgrade kit, I would love to see like a big saloon double door and a sign saying Scale and Ale. After the build, I do have 2 more window sections, but do I put them underneath that roof section or above this door? Truth is though, it's so modular it doesn't matter. Just look how beautiful it is. A few street lamps and this fountain from one of the prop sets really just bring together this entire scene. Is there anything more iconic in D&D than the big tavern? Again, the city streets, I got it for about £35. Genuinely amazing deal. But next time, we're going to dive deeper, going down the manhole of the city streets, into the Undercity, and I am so excited. There's so much to talk about with this kit. Guys, as always, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate every single one of you giving me the time. With a special shout out to all those on my Patreon, I cannot do this without you. If this video was helpful, please do hit that subscribe button. We are trying to hit 1,000, and thank you to all those who made up the 750. We hit that this week. I will see you next time, friends.